Singularity.
My name is Nicola, aka Socrates, and you're watching Singularity One-on-One. If you guys enjoyed this show, you can help me make it better by writing a review on iTunes or by simply making a donation. As always, I will be the man with the questions, and today, my guest is a co founder of Skype and Kazaa who got so famous in his homeland of Estonia that people actually named the biggest city after him. So, without further ado, welcome, Jaan Tallinn.
Yeah. Well, I wish that your statement was true. City is much older than I am.
Much older
But
than you.
I hope to be eventually be as old as the city is now.
Oh, you hope to live as long as the
yeah,
city?
I say that I am not against death, but I'm against the involuntary death. And Aubrey de Grey, etc. I know people like him, and so I completely share their efforts.
Mm-hmm. So yeah. Anyway, it's an interesting coincidence that your family name and your biggest city is the same, Tallinn. But it's even more interesting that you're a life extensionist. And by the way, your comment reminded me of a little bit to Woody Allen when he was being interviewed on one of the latest films in Cannes. They asked him, "Well, you always have a lot about death, so much about death in your movies. Has your relationship with death changed?" And he said, "No, my attitude's always been the same. I'm very much against it."
Yeah, good.
Yeah, so it kind of reminded me to that. But if I were to ask you to introduce yourself in your own words, Jan, how would you do that in the best way possible?
I have actually had I have a few quirky introductions about myself. One of them is
Okay, let's hear the most quirky one, perhaps.
the one that I used in a party and confused everyone was that I'm a guy who can take credit for about 1 million saved human relationships that I saved using my software.
Oh, wow. And you're referring to Skype.
There have been more, but like I think I can take credit for 1 million. And
How did you quantify that?
just like a Fermi calculation, like see like how many people come to me and how many users Skype has had. How many people contributed to Skype. So I think the rough estimate would be 1 million. Another one that I've used a couple of times is that I am a physicist and part of the conspiracy of physicists to save the world.
Very interesting. Yeah, I would bring in some other physicists in our conversation later on, such as Dr. Michio Kaku, who is a big skeptic about some of the things we're going to be discussing.
There is interesting correlation between, or interesting overrepresentation of physicists among the existential risk circles. And even people who wouldn't know that they're physicists, they actually have physics diploma. Nick Bostrom, for example, has a physics degree, and Stuart Russell, who is like a sort of the leading figure in academia right now among AI researchers about these topics, is a physicist from Oxford. So.
Yes, and of course, the most notable examples are Dr. Stephen Hawking and perhaps Max Tegmark also,
or
right?
Martin Rees and Hugh Price, who is the co-founder of Center for Study of Existential Risk in Cambridge, is a philosopher. Well, guess what? He has a physics degree.
Very interesting. So we may come back to that point, but let me ask you first a few things about yourself. Is it the case that after you moved on from Kazaa and Skype, you're kind of mostly spending your time now in two activities? One would be venture capitalist sort of investments, and the other would be as perhaps an evangelist to existential risks that humanity is facing today.
Right. Although, like a couple of clarifications there. First of all, I mostly spend my time on angel investments. Although, we do have sort of VC / private equity company together with other Skype founding engineers And on the existential risk side, uh, I don't think I'm only doing the evangelism. I'm also I would say I'm trying to build the world's muscle when it comes to dealing with potential existential risks. So I do really everything. I kind of network, I give talks, I just give money to people, and even kind of dabble in some research a little bit, etc., etc.
Well, fascinating, interesting. So going back perhaps to the previous point, noting that there's so many theoretical physicists in the field, perhaps you can share with us your journey of sort of starting in theoretical physics and even space travel at warp speeds, uh, of course, and then moving into issues such as existential risks in general, and then artificial intelligence in particular.
First of all, I'm kind of physicist by degree and perhaps by spirit, but not so much by sort of occupation. Like I was a computer programmer uh, already in primary school and had a games company already in high school, which was a bit of a feat because that was in back in Soviet Union where private enterprise wasn't really uh, like just was freshly become legal. So like when we had to decide like what to study in university, myself and my partner in crime Ahti, who later became the CTO of Skype, or the chief technical architect of Skype, we decided that well we know everything about computers already, so why why spend time in university like studying more about computers, and let's study something else. Let's study physics, and then we went to study physics. And on second year, Ahti saw that okay, this is just a waste of time. He's going to drop out and actually do something useful. But I kind of pushed myself through and got a degree in physics, which I think is actually helpful for my worldview, but not so much. So physics wasn't really a start of my journey. I guess that's what I'm saying here.
So computers were the original
Yes,
love.
exactly, and kind of the longer background fact about me. So yeah, like once I started scaling out from Skype, Skype got bigger and bigger, and there were like many sales. Skype was sold like 3 or 4 times, depending how you count. And at some point, there was this big lawsuit during which I couldn't really participate in Skype's development. And when I came back, so many stuff had changed, so many things had changed. So I never kind of fully caught up. And I was kind of looking for other interesting and important things to do. It's like a friend of mine, after we sold Skype, said that, so Jaan, so how does it feel to have your life's work done at such an early age? Which was annoying. And so I was kind of looking for things to do, and stumbled upon Eliezer Yudkowsky's writings on overcoming bias and later less wrong. And I couldn't really find a flaw in his arguments, and they seem to be really crazy on surface. But I'm a programmer, so I don't judge arguments by how crazy they sound. I judge them whether they make sense on logical level or not. So at some point, I kind of wrote him an email, and we we basically met up and spoke for many hours. After which I thought that okay, I should really start investigating this, and then I attended a couple of Singularity summits, and at the summit 2010, I approached Michael Vassar, who's a friend of mine now, and he basically started introducing me to various people in this whole existential risk scene, and this is like how I really kind of got started.
Very interesting. So let me ask you first the sort of the shiny side of the coin. What's your biggest dream, Jan? What's like the best case scenario? What is the kind of the dream that's like keeping you going, or that's making you cheerful and working towards?
I think my life is so much fun okay, two things. Like one is that I think my life is a lot of fun, surprising amount of fun, uh, and the other thing is like because the you know, biggest worry about sort of AI disasters are about side effects. Like we create something thinking that it does X, but no, it does actually X plus Y or even X plus epsilon. And then like the Y or epsilon is like really detrimental for us. So in that sense, actually kind of generalizing from this, I'm not sure if I want to kind of paint the picture of paradise or some transhuman utopia, because I know like my picture is going to have like so many like, bad side effects if it would actually kind of materialize. So instead, I think I'm kind of
Focus on the reverse side of the coin with the risks,
risks and
perhaps.
also like uh, on the observation that the world isn't doing that badly right now. There was this article report last year that 2015 was the best year for humanity that humanity has ever had. So the trends are good. So it's obviously there's a lot of suffering and misfortune out there still, but the trends are good. And so my kind of conservative vision, also sort of like minimum viable utopia, would be just keep these trends going and solidify them, and make sure that we're not going to just like fall off the cliff at some point.
But people would argue with you that that's actually not the case. I mean, turn on the TV, you'll see utter disasters, political terrorism, Syria, the Middle East is falling apart, not mentioning even bigger issues, perhaps, such as the threat of nuclear confrontation, which seems to be rising lately, not mentioning issues such as global warming, which can threaten us tremendously, and another one such as perhaps species extinction, which some people say we have not witnessed since the last 65 million years ago or something like that. uh, so I mean, how do you square your kind of claim that we've had the best year ever?
Well, that wasn't my claim, by the way. That was some article that I read where people did some analysis and looked at what the previous years were. And so like one thing is that you shouldn't draw your sample of the world from media. Like you will get only newsworthy stuff from media, and like people having happy lives isn't really like newsworthy. So like for example, like I think that there is this possible paradox. Like once we get self-driving cars, and the accident rate would drop to the level where it would make accidents newsworthy, that might actually make the car travel perceived as more risky. That's like because like, oh, there was a car accident. Like if there's like a worldwide news about this, like people would actually kind of be more hesitant to
Because it would be so rare and
exactly.
unique.
And so humans have this thing called availability bias. When they try to assess the risk of an event occurring, they try to think about when they last heard about this thing, meaning that the rarer the event, like media actually kind of makes it more likely that they have heard it recently. Anyway, so like that is one thing. Like you shouldn't kind of assess the world state based on media reports. They are biased. But yeah, you're absolutely right about there being very real risks such as nuclear exchange and the very real sort of adverse trends like global warming. So I do think that it's important to not naively extrapolate from the fact that things have been kind of improving over the centuries and decades and years. On average, we shouldn't like sort of assume that these trends are going to continue. In fact, I think this is what a lot of the technology optimists are doing. They kind of look at the fact that technology has been great for humanity, and there's actually a good reason why it has been, because there's this market feedback loop. Markets have been selecting for technology that has been good for humanity, but we shouldn't kind of assume that this is like a law of physics, that whatever technology comes next is going to be always better, or always going to make our lives better.
Well, the critics say that the laws of physics actually go against the progress of technology, because while we may have made progress for humanity in our human domain, it has come at the cost of the planetary biosphere, for example. So physics would say we're working with limited resources, whether in the form of species, whether in the form of biosphere resources, and stuff like that. And we've been exhausting them disproportionately, and our technology has created huge negative externalities, right? So while we're measuring things in economics, we cannot really properly measure environmental degradation or species extinction, and there's no associated cost with that we pay for, or global warming per se, which is why we have these perverse incentives to keep doing the same, because it pays in the short term in economic terms, though it may not be paying in the long term in planetary terms.
Yeah, that's effectively correct. So it's like, in fact, I am right now working on a document that I got inspiration for from a wonderful essay called "Meditations on Moloch," written by Scott Alexander on blog called Slate Star Codex, where he pointed out that, just as you said, that many of the humanity's biggest problems have this common game theoretic kernel, that they are bad Nash equilibriums. People have local incentives to do X, yet we know that if enough people do X, such as overfish, we will end up in a predictably end up in a bad situation.
Tragedy of the commons.
So I'm trying to think, like, first of all, research, and also think about like other ways how we can just improve the Nash equilibriums that we play in. And there are some positive examples. I think the most famous one is ozone layer. That was a bad Nash equilibrium that we managed to climb out of. So
I see. Yes, I agree. Okay, so we may come back to that, but let me ask you to be more specific here. So what, in your view, are the biggest existential risks that humanity is facing today?
I generally agree with the assessment of people like Future of Humanity Institute in Oxford. And I think the top 4 or 5, they were sort of non-value aligned artificial intelligence, then some weird organisms from synthetic biology, then nanotechnology going wrong, then like unknown unknowns, and then like for good measure, like I would add a nuclear arsenal. So I think nuclear arsenal is like a nuclear war, like all-out nuclear war, is sort of on a borderline. It's probably not an existential risk. It's probably some people will survive an all-out nuclear war, but first of all, we don't exactly know, and we probably don't want to try. And second, nuclear threat is something that people understand, so you can kind of start with nuclear threat and then sort of lead people towards what I consider are bigger threats, including the unknown unknown. Unknown unknowns are just observation that those 4 in the top 5 are less than 100 years old. So if you're really thinking 100 years ahead, it's possible that we're going to get more in that top.
Let me push back a little bit on that, perhaps by sharing my own personal journey in this. So when I started this blog, originally I would have probably agreed with the ranking. So let me say, I agree with the listing of those existential risks. I have issues with the ranking of them. And 5 or 6 years ago, when I started doing this podcast and this blog, 190 interviews ago, I would have probably agreed with the ranking too. Now I have gotten back to where I was before that, which I admit was my area of in the academy was political science. And so now, for example, I would rank human intelligence related existential risks, such as nuclear war, to be much higher than, for example, artificial intelligence. And the reason is multiple. There's multiple reasons for my sort of change of heart, if you will. One is the experience I've gathered in the last 190 interviews talking to people in the field of AI and so on. But the other is also the formula of sort of impact of each potential event multiplied by the likelihood of each of those, multiplied by the urgency or the perceived timeline to it, right? How urgent it is, how close or far away we are to it. And so in my kind of formula this way, I would put nuclear weapons or other WMGs at the top of the list. And I think the behavior of people such as Putin annexing Crimea and basically invading other countries like Ukraine or going into Syria, and then
That's very close to home to me. Yep.
absolutely. And you know, I grew up in the Eastern Bloc in Bulgaria, just like you did in Estonia. So we have a kind of a unique perspective on that, if you will. But also now we can observe other phenomena such as Donald Trump rising to prominence in American politics. Imagine Donald Trump and Mr. Putin in charge of 95% of the nuclear weapons in the world. I mean, to me, that kind of both raises both the likelihood and the urgency of problems that we may be foreseeing on the nuclear weapons danger front. And then, you know, we have the possibility of other weapons of mass destruction, such as biological, etc., which are becoming cheaper and more accessible as technology becomes more and more advanced and easily accessible. And we have people doing biohacking and all kinds of other phenomena. And now lots of people, just like people used to start computer companies in the 70s and the 80s, now they start biotech companies in their garages, whether in Silicon Valley or elsewhere. So what would you say to something like that? Where do I get it wrong? Where's the flaw in my logic?
I guess the so one crucial point is that like how much do we value future generations, and so if one really values future generations, and that's why I sometimes, when I get into an argument with people over the existential risk, I ask them, do they have children or not? But if you do have children, you will value future generations. As my co-founder at the Center for Study of Existential Risk at Cambridge, Martin Rees, likes to point out that there is a difference between killing 99% of humanity and 100% of humanity, and the difference is not 1%. Because if you kill 100% of people, you will lose all the future generations. There will be no recovery from this point. So the big question is like, what is the probability of all-out nuclear war, which I absolutely agree is a massive problem, and something that seems actually much more solvable than the much more volatile situation with AI. There have been some studies where people have been comparing the effects of supervolcanoes eruptions that humanity has survived to the effects from nuclear winter, and then like basically calculating that it's the probability of killing everyone with an all-out by detonating all the nuclear arsenal isn't that great.
I think they were discredited, actually, those studies, and there were new studies after that, because you're referring to the ones which are saying that in a no-out nuclear war, mainly the northern hemisphere would be impacted. Therefore, life would survive in the sort of southern hemisphere and stuff like that, because not all of the planet will be impacted. The impact of nuclear weapons has been dramatically underestimated. There's been new studies afterwards.
Okay, perhaps I don't have recent data, at which point I will definitely update. Yeah.
But that aside, also, how do you measure the chance that AI would destroy 100%? How do we know that it wouldn't destroy 90 or 85 or 97? How can we quantify that? Because I mean, it's easier to quantify on nuclear weapons than on the AI possibility.
So, like, first of all, like I think it's in some ways like AI is like an outlier in these like top risks that I mentioned. And sort of the one thing why it's an outlier is that it has a massive positive side, in that's much bigger than any other technology there, because like it's a sort of meta technology. Like if we get this right, we'll automatically fix all the other existential risks. Whereas like if we just get nanotechnology right, we're not going to fix the AI risk automatically. So in some ways, I am actually not even sure whether just going ahead and developing AI is going to be a positive or negative. It's possible that we, like, even though we will die most of the worlds, the worlds that remain are just so good that they kind of as a kind of utilitarian, I have to overweight, like the average actually wouldn't be that bad. That said, I don't think that's some like a good heuristic to. We have to be much more careful when we assess the potential AI futures. But yeah, AI has a massive positive side. So it's we can't just say that it's an existential threat. It is an existential opportunity, as they say as well. Now,
whereas nuclear weapons have no positive effect whatsoever.
Exactly. Well, I mean, you can probably kind of conjure up some weird game theoretic positive, like mutually assured destruction or whatnot. Yeah, the world hasn't had world wars after the invention of nuclear weapons. Whether that's a causation or correlation, we don't know. Now, but the AI thing is that the really kind of important thing about AI is that it's just much more powerful than any other things on the list, because it kind of includes those things in the list. Like whatever, like once we have AI that's better at developing technology than humans are, like all the concerns we have about technology, we have to kind of like include in our concerns about what AI is going to do. So
I agree completely with you. It's the most powerful technology. I just don't see the logical jump from it being the most powerful to it guaranteed to extinguish 100% of us. That's where I kind of fail to make the logical jump.
So one way of like,
it's definitely a possibility, but how probable or likely it is, I cannot estimate.
So one interesting observation about the universe is that we are in a very atypical point of the universe. Somebody said, I forget who, that if you take a typical point in the universe, it's going to be completely pitch black, because it's so far from the stars that you can't even see them. So we shouldn't take our environment for granted, and anything that would kind of even slightly disturb any technology that has the power to even slightly disturb our environment is going to just exterminate life on this planet. Because like if in kind of absolute scale, the random point in the universe and the environment that we have now they're just like so far apart. If you only slightly perturb it, like it's not going to be compatible with continued life. So that's why I think, like, if you're talking about technologies that can have the power to rearrange atoms on this planet, it's really hard to remain alive if it turns solar system into a completronium. So it's that's why I'm just like thinking about the scale. It's kind of really hard to massively terraform the planet, and in a way that only affects like 99% of people.
Right, and I agree with you on that. But all-out nuclear war is also terraforming the planet in a different way.
So sometimes when I want to be euphemistic about what I'm concerned about, this is that I'm really concerned about long-term environmental sustainability, because like almost all the existential risks they manifest themselves by making the environment uninhabitable.
Exactly, and also the huge importance to that assessment that we make here, logically speaking, is the definition of life. So is AI going to be considered life or not? Is that computronium going to be considered life or not? Because if it is, and if AI is life, whether we exist or not, then life continues in the universe. So it's not going to be the pitch dark, kind of infinitely boring point in the universe, but it's going to be a bustling, computing, things happening kind of a computronium.
This is the moment where I usually ask people, do you have children?
And I say no, I admit I don't.
So yeah, like I have had like people say things like, perhaps humanity does not deserve to survive, and then like, do you have children?
No, I haven't said that. I haven't.
Yeah, no. I'm just like giving. I think the general class is that people sometimes make kind of abstract arguments about why the AI future is going to be good, nevertheless. But I think the kind of the practical details are also important. So, for example, in your thing, it's like, is this thing going to be conscious or not? Is important. We have no idea what consciousness. Well, we have some idea what consciousness is, but not enough to actually make confident predictions about whether there will be consciousness in the universe, or the alternative is called Disneyland without children.
Well, some of the things that I'm saying are kind of me just being Socrates here and trying to push you further. But others are actually things that have come in my previous conversation with some very notable people. So, for example, let me give you a couple of examples. I interviewed both Noam Chomsky and Dr. Marvin Minsky. And
lucky you.
I was amazed. Both of them agreed on the following claim, that we have made zero progress in artificial intelligence for the last 50 years, that all the progress that has been made in what they both called narrow artificial intelligence, that it has been made based on brute forcing, basically, which Noam Chomsky said in the 50s was the only way we have chance to make anything until and unless we have a better theory of mind, which, by the way, Dr. Minsky also entirely agreed with it. And some other people whom we brought into our conversation before the interview started, like John Horgan said in my interview, AI is like nuclear fusion. It's always 30 years away, right? So in the 50s, people thought, oh, we're just going to have 5 or 10 years and we'll have AI. And it's been 50 or 60 years and we still don't have it. So my question to you is, have we really made much progress? Because, as I said, my formula for ranking those existential risks is impact multiplied by likelihood multiplied by urgency.
That's correct.
So how far away are we? Are we getting closer? Are we making progress?
I mean, I think you have to have like pretty weird worldview to say that we haven't made any progress on AI. Like, I mean, you can always define. I mean, there's this thing called, I forget whose law it was. Basically, once AI development managed to do something, it stops being called AI. So there is that.
AI is anything we haven't accomplished yet.
Exactly, and by that definition, yes, we have made zero progress towards AI. But I think it's just foolish to brush aside latest breakthroughs from people like DeepMind. And when you say that everything is kind of narrow AI, I don't think that the games playing AI that I did that takes like the visual representation of the field of a computer game and then figures out how to act in that computer game is narrow AI in the context of that computer game.
Well, let me ask you this: can it do anything else other than playing that game?
Yes, what this system did was it played like hundreds of different games.
I understand, but can it do any other function? Because that's the difference between narrow and general AI. General AI can do many anything.
I think it's like important to kind of communicate the difference between a narrow AI and general AI. And this the point is that within the domain of Atari computer games, which is like limited domain because it doesn't have enough like comparable amount of data that the real world has and the comparable amount of degrees of freedom. But it's like the typical AIs that play computer games, usually as an opponent to humans or like non-player characters. They are custom built for that game. They know that basically people have put in the rules of the game and have like developed algorithms that make those characters react and play in the game. Whereas what DeepMind did was take the visual pixel representation, what's going on the screen, and slap general reinforcement learning, deep learning, Q learning, I think they called it, AI on top of that. So it actually looked at the game and explored its possible actions and learned what is the structure of the game, what are the algorithms. So the algorithms that Atari playing AI ended up using were not developed by humans. These are the algorithms that it itself learned from just observing the view. So you can like imagine that in that sense, like the system was general within the domain of this game. You can imagine that if we had computers that are like million or like, I don't know, billion times faster, which is like, I don't know, if the Moore's law would continue, which it seems that it's not obvious that it will. If it would continue, we're talking about a few decades. It's not inconceivable that you could kind of take this Atari playing AI almost unmodified, run it on a computer that's like billion or trillion times faster, and just hook it up to your webcam or like a security camera instead of having it play in the domain of 2D games. And DeepMind already are upgrading the system to 3D games. So it like once you have that system and the computers that are much more powerful, I think it's like just ridiculous to say that the AI hasn't made any progress.
You know, I agree with you entirely on that, but I was amazed when Marvin Minsky told me precisely that. I was less amazed when Noam Chomsky did so, but I was very much amazed by Marvin Minsky. And let me try and support their vision here a little bit. So they would reply to you perhaps that, yes, you're making a valid point of the difference between, let's say, for example, Deep Blue, which defeated Garry Kasparov in chess, and DeepMind, which recently won in Go.
AlphaGo,
right?
Yes. Yep.
As you said, fundamental differences there. And yet they would reply, in both cases, they're limited to the particular domain, whether it's chess playing or whether it's the game of Go. In other words, you cannot copy and paste that AI and ask it to drive a car or ask it to fly an airplane or ask it to tell you to play Jeopardy or ask it to diagnose cancer. So in other words, it's very narrow. It does only one thing.
I'm pretty sure that with slight modifications, you can ask it to diagnose cancer.
That's my next question. Yes. So because I know you were actually an investor in DeepMind, if I'm
I'm director of DeepMind. Yes.
So what's next? That's very interesting for me. What's next, and how do we go from this limited domain, which quite honestly very few people care about, geeks and probably.
Well, I mean, AlphaGo was a huge news in Asia, especially.
I agree absolutely. I agree absolutely. But let's talk about the Western world. How can we show people this is really artificial intelligence? What would be the next step?
I mean, I'm not sure if it's like a sort of goal in itself to show people that this is an artificial.
No, but usefulness demonstrates, right? Applicability demonstrates, effectiveness demonstrates the existence of anything like that. So yes, we're making those benchmarks along the line that Ray Kurzweil is talking about towards the singularity and artificial intelligence. But interesting thing is that, for example, I interviewed David Ferrucci, who was the team leader of IBM behind Watson. And I asked him, so Ray Kurzweil said that Watson is like a perfect example of a benchmark along the way towards the singularity. Do you see that? And he said, I absolutely do not see that. I absolutely cannot see how that's going to happen. So it's interesting to me that I've talked to all those people who are there at the cutting edge and who don't see those things.
Yeah, I mean, Watson is a completely closed system, so it's like hard to tell like what it really was, other than it did have great performance in a couple of domains.
And yet they're trying to translate it to medical diagnosis, to perhaps data analysis, to customer service on phone calls, and to a bunch of other things. Even law companies are taking it to do some paralegal and legal assistant jobs and stuff like that. And there's an open API, by the way, for Watson now for developers.
So, like, I mean, one thing is that there is this very sort of real trade-off that you have to make when you're doing AI for research purposes or AI for practical application purposes. And like, for example, in robotics, you can see it like really, really well. Like I don't think that robots are anything to fear, other than perhaps military robots. They have their own catastrophic failure modes. But the thing is that with robotics is that, as my long business partner Ahti has said, that like, usually the reason why robots fail, they're like really, really mundane. You just forget to like bring a battery, or like there's some like some soldier point is like not properly soldiered. So I think Mari Minsky also made that point that roboticists end up just soldiering a lot, and as opposed to actually developing the AI. And I think the important point is that in robotics and sort of application-oriented areas in general, there's a lot of additional work that needs to be done in addition to the AI bit. So those application areas, if you're actually focusing on application things, even like providing healthcare, you're actually unlikely going to be making sort of the breakthrough AI research. AI research breakthroughs. AI research breakthroughs are probably more likely to come from places like DeepMind that are just focusing on the research. But now, of course, they are actually doing some applications as well. But I think they are kind of keeping those teams separate, as far as I know.
So let me give you another example of another person I've interviewed on my show. His name is Peter Voss. And he works on artificial general intelligence. And he said the following to me. During a recent visit in Los Angeles, we went out for dinner, and he told me, look, it's impossible to develop artificial general intelligence if you're working on artificial narrow intelligence. So he told me, that those are his words, not mine. He said, how many people in the world are explicitly working on artificial general intelligence? And he said there's very few, because I was talking to him about DeepMind and Watson and all those other places. And he's like, well, those people, if you listen to their interviews and if you watch what they're saying they're working on artificial narrow intelligence. So how can they ever develop a general intelligence if they're admittedly working on narrow one?
DeepMind's tagline is solve intelligence. So
yes, absolutely. I absolutely it is, which is a fascinating play of words. But he said, forget about the marketing and the mottos, right? I mean, Google would also say, we are not a search engine, we are an AI company, and we want to know what you want to know before you want to know it. That's what Eric Schmidt said years ago. But Peter Voss says there's very few people working on AGI currently. Some of them are him, some are people like Ben Giorgio, for example, but very few, in other words.
I think that sort of a soft version of that statement is pretty close to what I just said. That if you have sort of pull from application areas, then your actual research is going to be suboptimal. And I think Ben Giorgio has made that point as well before. So I think that is absolutely true. On the other hand, I don't think you can kind of say that DeepMind is a narrow AI. You're basically bending the definition if you're saying that DeepMind is not aiming for general AI.
You're saying that we're making progress, but let me share with you a little bit of a frustration, which is not related to artificial intelligence in particular, yet it is related with technology in general, and it's a very good example that may be close to your home, and that's particularly Skype. So let me tell you this. I've been using Skype to record my interviews for 6 years now. And for the last 6 years, it's been getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And what I mean by that is this. I'm forced to use third-party plugin software to record this conversation with you. And Skype has first gotten, in my personal experience, more unreliable in the last 6 years than it was 6 years ago. And secondly, it keeps breaking the third-party software that I have to use, whether deliberately or not, that I have to use to record these. It's been such an absolute nightmare. And I've gone through maybe all of the available, which are about half a dozen available vendors on market right now. And it's a hit and miss. Every interview that I do with Skype right now, I have I cannot predict whether I'll be able to record it or not. And that's why I always have a Zoom backup. The reason why I prefer Skype is because the recordings are much higher quality, and I'm able to separate the video streams, which allows me to edit separately afterwards and do better stuff in post-production. But Zoom is much more reliable. And many people that I know, my friends, have moved away from Skype even. And they're like, oh, that's like so 2000 or something. Like now we have Zoom, we have other stuff. And to me, is it fair to say, and do you agree with the statement that, in my view at least, Skype has deteriorated for the last 6, 7, 10 years, I don't know, than originally? And I mean, people said, originally, my understanding is that Skype even had encryption embedded, so the NSA couldn't even monitor the original conversations as well as after Microsoft bought them. Then there were all kinds of issues that we started experiencing.
Well, I haven't been with Skype for 10 years or so. I have been with Skype for a while, so I really can't speak for Skype nor Microsoft. In my own personal experience, since I'm kind of fairly careful with my setup and I have a good internet connectivity, I don't think I can I don't think I had the same experience that the Skype experience has deteriorated. I do think that there is some correlation between what you just said. You said that Skype's quality is higher and its reliability is lower. I mean, if you are hostage to the sort of your bandwidth situation, that's.
I have the best you can buy in Canada.
Yeah, but your conversation partners don't. So it's. This is what you would expect. Like it's much easier to do a fully reliable conversation that has lower quality. Whereas like if you're really trying to push like many pixels through the connection, that might have some interference, etc.
I think the issue is more the compatibility with the recording software plugins, and my failure to understand why Skype doesn't implement such easy thing inside of their user interface, Why do I have to resort to third parties? And why do they keep breaking the compatibility? That blows my mind. And I used to never have that problem 6 years ago. Now I had to go through half a dozen of suppliers, and none of them actually works. And even this one I'm using now is a hit and miss.
Again, sort of honest, like the first answer is I don't know. Like thinking back 10 years ago or so, there was like they're actually kind of like if you're running a business, there are actual trade-offs that you have to make. You have to think about like if you're limited by money, which Skype really wasn't. If you're limited by developer bandwidth, which Skype always was, then you have to think about like where do you spend this development? Like who are your markets and who are your users who you want to please the most? And I think in Skype's case, it always was that people who did sort of integrations and used the API, they kind of took the backseat. We were always trying to find ways to grow, and there was no. I don't think there was. Although we did have like people who were sort of developer advocates, etc. But App Store was not launched back then. iPhone wasn't a thing, so there wasn't really a strong conviction in the company that you could build like a massive developer ecosystem around Skype. So I guess that was one of the reasons why they were kind of very often forgotten when developer resources were assigned. I don't know what's going on right now, but it could be also some kind of very pragmatic decisions.
And it's not perhaps so important. I just wanted to sort of vent my frustrations and give an example at the same time of a technology which, in my experience, has deteriorated rather than improved for the last 6 years, which I think may be pertinent to our conversation. But I know your time is very valuable, so let me quickly go through the next few questions for the next few minutes, if I may. So, are you a soft takeoff or hard takeoff scenario kind of guy?
I think it's actually kind of ties to the earlier question about timelines or like what progress AI has made. I think in both those questions, they are really important questions. What is the progress that we are making in AI, and is it going to be a soft takeoff or hard takeoff? If we had any idea how to do research to find out more about this question, we should definitely do it. It would be like really worthwhile thing to spend money and time on. So it's like when we talk about progress, it's like the question really isn't like how much progress, like can we say that we have made zero or more progress? The question is like how confidently can we say that we have made zero progress? And I don't think like it's just would be insane to say confidently that we have made zero progress. And the same thing with soft takeoff and hard takeoff. It's probably like less of a question like do you think soft takeoff is more likely or hard takeoff is more likely? The question is like if you think that soft takeoff is more likely, how confident you are in that? Because like even if there's a chance of like 10% or like 1% of hard takeoff, like we should like really if we define soft takeoff something that we can manage as we go along, then we still should spend a lot of time figuring out how to get rid of that 1% or how to manage that 1%. So in my view, I do think that hard takeoff is more likely for various reasons than soft takeoff, but not like convincingly so. I think probably go like right now with like 70% hard takeoff and then 30% soft takeoff or so.
When I interviewed Jaron Lanier, he told me that the Singularity is likely going to end up with the blue screen of death. So he wasn't scared of hard takeoff scenarios at all. But he's a known critic. So anyway, what's the timeline then you see potentially to reaching that point? I mean, Ray Kurzweil has gone on the record that perhaps 2029, 28, or 2045, the latest, somewhere thereabouts. Where do you stand on that timeline?
I mean, I don't have any date. I think it would be silly to say that. Yeah.
Ray has a date.
Yeah, it's. I think it's like more like a marketing message than a very serious prediction. But I don't think we need to have very concrete prediction in mind, as long as it's not like thousands of years or hundreds of years. And I don't think we can be confident that it will be hundreds of years, to say nothing about thousands of years. We already know that we are not prepared. So we should do stuff that actually increase the probability of good outcomes now, even while we are not confident about or uncertain about the exact timelines. But there is one piece of research that Future of Humanity Institute in Oxford did. It was a couple of articles. One was World Brain Emulation Roadmap, and the other was I don't know what was the name of the article, but the idea was that Anders Sandberg at the Future of Humanity Institute did like a bunch of Monte Carlo simulations to derive the probability distribution for this century. The interesting thing about brain emulation is that it's a fairly predictable way to get the superhuman intelligence, in the sense that you don't need like really hard to predict breakthroughs. Like you can look at the existing trends in microscopy and computing power, and just extrapolate them and look at what is our best knowledge about the level of simulations that we need to make, and then like crunch it all in a Monte Carlo simulation and get the probability distribution out. And that's what he did. And I think his probability estimate was that the 50% probability was in late 2060s. So it basically gives you one way of reaching superhuman intelligence, which basically should like significantly lower your confidence if you're saying that the AI is like 300 years or 7,000 years away.
Right. I have to agree with you on both points. And of course, I've interviewed Anders Sandberg and Stuart Armstrong, and even the late Dr. James Martin, after whom the Oxford Martin School is named after. So, and I have to agree with you with both the impact and the probability. I mean, there's nothing so far that I've seen that shows that it's impossible. And it seems that the majority opinion coalesces around mid-century. So we actually don't have too much time. I totally agree with that. But some of the critics often criticize Ray Kurzweil for being too optimistic, underplaying the sort of existential risk threats posed to humanity and overplaying the upside.
I think Ray Kurzweil comes off like that, but then if you're actually going to have a sort of a deeper conversation with him, which I have, or listen to him more carefully, he's not like sort of 100% optimist. He does think that these issues are important, and it's important to think about the safety aspects.
Yeah, of course. I agree with that too. It's just that's the perception, at least. That's why I want to ask you, what's your probability, or if I may push you to say, what's your percentage chance of sort of us surviving the singularity, perhaps, in your view? Can you quantify that based on your experience and work in the last years?
Hard to say. Like there are like, I think like if the world would stop thinking about these issues and just go ahead with AI development as if we did like 10 or 20 years ago, we are almost certainly doomed. However, I basically look around and see that there's a massive amount of progress in the last few years when people are kind of woken up to the fact that we need to solve the things like value alignment and or figure out things how we can constrain the behaviors of agents that are potentially much smarter than us and much more powerful when it comes to rearranging the environment and controlling the technological progress. And so these issues are taken much more seriously. If I extrapolate that trend and see like kind of take courage in the last few years, and then I'm actually really optimistic. I do think that I think we are more likely to survive than not. But this is just like based on the great progress that we have made in the last few years.
Because I'm always amazed what kind of number people give me. For example, Michael Onisimov gave me 2%. A number of other people from Miri have given me kind of very low percentage points.
When did it do that? Like I had like one Miri researcher say to me that like after some breakthrough that I had forgotten what it felt to be in double digits again. Meaning that he basically saw that there was like so great advance when it comes to safety that he upgraded to like 10%.
Excellent point. Yeah, that was about 5 years ago. So let's hope we're in the double digit area
things were
again.
like really bleak 5 years ago. So
yes, fantastic, excellent point. So you do believe that we can really build a friendly AI then?
Yeah, I mean, the term that we're using currently is value aligned AI, which sounds more sophisticated and also like I think has better sound to it. Yeah, we absolutely can do it, and then that there have been kind of some research breakthroughs that just recently that point to some ways how to do it. It's still like really early days, but yeah, I'm very hopeful that this progress will continue and we figure it out how to do it.
What is the most promising avenue, perhaps, you can share with us?
One research that's being done in conjunction with DeepMind and Future of Humanity Institute is so-called interoperability. So the idea is that you configure or structure your reinforcement learner, your reinforcement learning agent in a way that makes it indifferent to the state of being on or off. So it's like, and you really want to make it absolutely indifferent. So because like if it cares a little about being on, it's still going to throw a universe at you in order to make sure that it stays on, or vice versa. Like if it cares little about being off, then it will throw a universe at you in order to be turned off. But like if it's just so completely like indifferent, then basically you would get ability to control it later. Say that okay, sorry, this isn't what I meant. Let me turn it off and restart again. To do it basically the way we usually develop programs. Look at what they're doing.
No self-preservation.
Yes. So that there seems to be, I think, DeepMind and Stuart Armstrong at FHI are supposed to present it in July in New York at HKI, but this is like just something that I heard. I'm not sure if they will get to that point. So, and the other thing is Paul Cristiano at Berkeley is doing a really interesting research about he calls how was it? Approval-directed agents. So the idea is that instead of giving an AI utility function and just trying really hard to make sure that you get the utility function correct in the first try, you build an AI whose purpose is to figure out the utility function. So figure out what do we want and then do what we want. And the way Paul structures things is that he creates. The idea is to create just like a usual deep learning or reinforcement learning agent that's trying to make predictions. What would humans do in my place? What would a human committee do in my place? And then use that prediction module to guide its behavior while randomly sampling from actual humans or human committee. And the nice thing about it that you can even sample retroactively. So the AI goes about doing its stuff, and every once in a while it stops and asks the committee that was that the right thing to do or not. And if it gets gets information, it basically back propagates and trains its prediction module in order to basically
Humanizing the
Yes,
AI.
humanizing the AI. So that's like one. Like it has its own downsides, etc. But like it just think about it. Like the world has perhaps like 10 people working on these issues. Like if we had like hundreds or thousands, like think about the amount of progress that we could be making.
Right, I agree. And the utility functions reminded me a little bit to Steve Omohundro's work on provable, safe mathematical constraints and what he calls AI scaffolding.
But the bottom line is that, and I keep like selling and saying this to people, that the topic of developing value-aligned AIs is just really, really interesting. You don't. It's not. You don't. Like if you're developing just competent AIs, like you have to just think about sort of technical challenge, like sometimes like domain-specific technical challenge. Whereas if you're thinking about how can we develop something that that could potentially exceed human intelligence, you're effectively in the process of searching for the best possible future for humanity. And this is not just like technical challenge. This is like, you end up in philosophy like almost like daily. So it's actually really, really fascinating. And so I think like just more people should do it because it's so interesting and so much fun.
Exactly my point. And that's why my blog is not really about technology, but my blog is about ethics, because I believe what we make with technology is what makes the difference one way or another. In other words, technology is amoral, but how we use it, how we apply it makes it immoral or moral. And it's a choice, right? And it's a directed choice. It's a conscious, hopefully conscious choice that we're aware of, and we direct towards the better outcome rather than the worse. So perhaps now I should ask you about the importance of philosophy and ethics here. Do you think that matters?
Oh, I think philosophy matters a lot, especially. I think there's a like very fertile cross section between philosophy and computer science. As Daniel Dennett has said, computers keep philosophy honest. So if you are a philosopher who can also program, instead of making philosophical statements that are grounded in your intuitions, you can actually write computer code that expresses your philosophical thoughts. And that's like, I think, way more productive because, as I say, that philosophers have had like thousands of years to think interesting thoughts and write interesting sort of, I don't know, dialogues and pieces. And now we need answers, and we need those answers in computer code. So it's actually very valuable area.
Well, Jan, I've been keeping you here for way too long, perhaps. So let me close our conversation, unfortunately, down with the last two short questions. First is, where can people find more about you and your work? What's the best place?
So one thing I did edge.org interview last year, and where I like spent an hour, a little bit more, explaining these things. I don't really have like a sort of public web presence. It's somewhere down in my to-do list. Like I sometimes joke that if the world is going to be destroyed in the next 20 years, it's going to be destroyed by someone that I personally know. So it's like I don't really need like a web presence to reach those people. I can just
Wow.
go and network with them and talk to them. But yeah, eventually I might end up developing some like more public presence, which you can just Google me and see some of my talks.
Very interesting. Yeah, I have to say I noticed that issue when I was kind of doing my background preparation for our conversation today. Jan, we've touched on a variety of issues today, and I've kind of pushed you, I hope, in a friendly way, to kind of reassess and re-justify your stand. And we covered a variety of topics. What, in your opinion, is the best way to wrap this up? What's the parting message you want to send us with?
I think I mean, there could be many messages. So I'm just like picking one. One might be that I think solving value-aligned AI is obviously the most important problem that humanity has, unless we screw up in some other ways before we get there. And I think it's an engineering challenge. So it's not productive to put on your psychologist hat and think about like what would I do if I were an AI? It is as productive as thinking about how can I build a bridge by imagining what would I do if I were a bridge. So one metaphor that I use recently, and it has I've gotten some positive feedback about this metaphor being good, is that we should think about AI development as if building a rocket. You can imagine that humanity is already sitting in a rocket that hasn't taken off yet, and there are like tens of thousands of people and tens of billions of dollars annually being poured into making sure that the acceleration is going to be there, so we can actually reach liftoff. However, there are just tens or even less people working on the steering bit, and luckily the world is waking up to two important facts. One is that steering is important in rockets. It's not just about acceleration. And the second thing is that this is an engineering challenge. Just like putting a rocket to Moon or Mars is an engineering challenge. Figuring out how to do AI safely in a value-aligned way is an engineering challenge. So we need to actually take this as an engineering challenge, not as a political or psychological challenge.
I love your point. Steering is important, even in a rocket, and engineering, it's an engineering problem. But let me just push back for a second here, just a little bit, if I may. I can't resist the temptation. Because you said, unless we have some other major disaster. Well, in the next 20 or 30 years, we are scheduled, just the United States, to spend $1 trillion on nuclear weapons, by the way. Not billions, trillions. So there's more money there. And those disasters that can prevent us from AI, as you said, should, in my opinion, be higher ranked as existential risks. And those are nuclear war or conflict, and those are perhaps issues like global warming and stuff like that. But also, to your second point, it's an engineering problem. I would say it's not just an engineering problem, right? It's an ethical problem, because yes, the engineering problem is how can we make the rocket steer at warp speed? The philosophical problem is where do we want to go in the first place, right? So how do we consider the potential possibilities for directions, and how do we rank them? How do we choose the safest and best?
There's a beautiful analogy with rocket, like choosing where to go is not an engineering challenge, but actually making sure that we get there is an engineering challenge.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think it's a mutual, both engineering and an ethical problem, which to be successful, each one of those solutions on their own is insufficient. We need the engineering problem resolved, but we need the philosophical one too together. And if one of them fails, I think we would have a total failure.
Absolutely, I agree. And also I cheer on like all people who are working on like sort of more conventional problems, like global warming or fighting malaria, and they are like, I take all the existential risk reduction that I can get, basically. It's just like, I spend my time where I think I can make the biggest difference.
Fantastic. And you are making a difference, and I appreciate your work and your time today very much. So, Jaan Tallinn, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
If you guys enjoyed this show, you can help me make it better in a couple of ways. You can go and write a review on iTunes, or you can simply make a donation.